May 1940. An entire army stood with its back to the water. The German blitzkrieg had torn through the Low Countries and northern France with terrifying speed, bypassing the strongest French defenses and driving the British Expeditionary Force and their allies into a shrinking pocket along the coast. Around the small port of Dunkirk, sand became sanctuary and potential graveyard. Too few piers, too much shallow water for large ships, and the Luftwaffe prowled overhead. It should have been the end. And yet, fate stalled. German armor, having raced to the channel, halted under a controversial order while infantry caught up. Those days gave the Allies time to dig canal defenses, to form rear guards, to bleed and delay. Beneath Dover Castle, Admiral Bertram Ramsay shaped Operation Dynamo, a desperate gamble to evacuate across the English Channel. No one spoke of saving an army. The word was survival. On the beaches, discipline battled panic. Soldiers waded into the surf in neat ranks, rifles slung, water rising to their chests, waiting for boats that might never appear. Stukas screamed down, sirens weaponizing fear. Bombs flung sand and seawater high. Overturned launches carved lagoons into the beach. Yet men held their lines. That grim patience became its own courage. The harbor lay in ruins, but ingenuity found a path. A stone breakwater, the East Mole, never meant for embarkation, was turned into a makeshift pier by Commander Dunkirk Joe Tennant. Destroyers and transports edged alongside, loading hundreds at a time. From the shallows, small craft ferried men outward. The channel, often treacherous, grew strangely calm. Smoke shrouded the horizon, where silhouettes multiplied. Trawlers, paddle steamers, tugboats, yachts, lifeboats, the little ships of Dunkirk, details etched themselves into memory. Some soldiers stood so long in icy seawater that their legs went numb, and they had to be hauled aboard like cargo. Signalers, waist-deep on the mole, flagged ships through wrecks like traffic policemen. Above, unseen by most, RAF pilots fought bitter duels with Messerschmitts to shield the beaches. On land, French units defended villages street by street, trading hours for lives. Sacrifice was inevitable. Tanks, guns, trucks, an army's weight were abandoned, spiked, or torched. The beaches glittered with helmets, rifles, and crates no one had time to save. But the line held just long enough for boats to arrive, load, and depart. Night after night, men shuffled toward the surf, guided by the glow of oil tanks burning and the heartbeat of engines offshore. Beyond the immediate chaos, quieter scenes threaded through the drama. Men exchanged stories to keep warm, trading cigarettes and thin rations, sharing soaked biscuits with a stranger whose name they never learned. Chaplains paced the mole, offering quick prayers and steady hands. Medics improvised with torn shirts as bandages, and stretcher bearers moved in a slow, solemn rhythm. On some decks, the chatter of seabirds mixed with the metallic rattle of shells and the low moan of wounded men. Logistics were brutal and improvisational. Officers scribbled manifests on scraps of paper, noting who needed medical attention, who could board the next launch, and who must remain. Units that had been whole a week earlier were reduced to fragments, sergeants counting faces where battalions had been. Yet the messy human process somehow kept functioning. Boats of every shape and size threaded the shallows. Crews lowered themselves into surf and climbed back exhausted, hauling men toward temporary safety. Individual acts of courage stitched the evacuation together. A petty officer who doubled back when a launch began to list, dragging two soaked soldiers to the gangway, a radio operator who kept sending coordinates despite a mangled wrist, a merchant captain who refused to leave until every last civilian had reached the mole. None were headline-making, but together they saved thousands. When men reached English soil, strangers pressed out tea and blankets. Dunkirk, the miracle of survival. The miracle became a mosaic of planning, luck, weather, and courage. A bicycle courier dodged shell bursts with a dispatch that redirected a destroyer. A French captain held a crossroads until his last grenade. Civilian skippers steered by pocket compasses, guided only by smoke on the wind. Piece by piece, these fragments stitched together the impossible, an army carried home by endurance. As June began, the perimeter shrank to a ragged horseshoe. Every gun was pressed to the wire. Every alley turned into a firing lane. British, French, and Belgian rearguards fought like anchors driven into the earth, buying minutes that became lives across the channel. On the mole, officers counted men in clumps, 50, then 100, jamming decks until rails bristled with helmets and elbows. Not every ship survived. Bombs tore into decks, torpedoes split hulls, fires climbed masts. Still, more vessels came. Paddle steamers built for holidaymakers ferried soldiers shoulder to shoulder. Colliers and drifters steamed beside destroyers, their crews listening for the shriek that meant dive or die. At night, the sea burned with spilled fuel, casting ghostly light as sailors leaned over rails to drag strangers aboard by fistfuls of webbing and sodden uniforms. On shore, French divisions staged last stands amid orchards and rubble, holding back the tide so others could escape. The British poured through the bottleneck, ship after ship. When the order came for Britain's withdrawal, thousands of French still fought on the quays. Around 40,000 would be captured when the final defense collapsed. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The count astonished even participants. More than 300,000 souls delivered from the beaches to the chalk cliffs of Dover. They arrived mud-caked, weaponless, exhausted, an army stripped but not broken. In England, civilians pressed tea and bread into frozen hands. Mechanics worked through the night to rearm them. Across the channel, an empty shoreline smoldered. In the weeks that followed, the consequences of the evacuation unfolded both practically and emotionally. Commanders reorganized shattered formations around surviving officers and non-commissioned men. Training intensified to remake disciplined units from exhausted survivors. Shipyards and factories raced to replace lost material, while Navy crews repaired hulls and rewired damaged radios. The government juggled shortages and rationing, but civilian kindness proved relentless. Volunteers offered boats, dock workers labored through darkness, and neighborhoods opened their doors to men who had nowhere else to go. For many soldiers, survival did not bring immediate peace. They carried the smell of diesel, sea, and cordite in their clothes. Sleep came only in jolting bursts on station platforms and in temporary billets. Memories of beaches, of comrades lost to sudden fire, haunted dreams, and forged a hardened camaraderie. Men who had been mere neighbors in barracks now shared a bond sealed by experience and endurance. That bond would be tested again, but it also became the seed of renewed purpose. Politically, Dunkirk bought Britain breathing space. It allowed time to reorganize, to rearm, and to seek alliances that would later prove decisive. The evacuation altered public mood. Shock gave way to resolve. Images of the little ships were repeated in newspapers and posters, not as a consolation, but as a call to action. Craftsmen and engineers worked through nights, and dockyards that had seemed vulnerable turned into engines of reconstruction. The Army, though reduced in hardware, held a living core capable of being rebuilt. The evacuation did not win the war, but it kept Britain fighting.